hundreds of Washington Republicans, of course, revolted against Trump over his probably biggest political vulnerability and oddest charge that he's faced in this whole first year of the term, where Donald Trump basically went out of his way to repeatedly minimize and defend a sex trafficker, refusing the transparency he once vowed and giving lenience to that trafficker's co-conspirator. That's just a capsule summary of what Republicans ultimately had to revolt against rather than defend when there was a vote. Top Republicans, though, have not stopped there. It would seem that, as we heard from some of our experts during that week, what started wasn't just going to end, because if the emperor had no clothes, or whatever phrase you want to use, Republicans found that they did have a voice, and most of them didn't face any great consequence or punishment in the real world for standing up to Trump independently once. And you might do it twice. Indeed, on some issues, it's quite obvious that Republicans do better running against Trump, even if they worry about his personal vendettas in response. The issue now this week, of course, is the serious questions about how this Trump administration conducts war and whether, as experts are questioning, whether a war crime has occurred. So people want a lot more answers from Defense Secretary Hegseth. The question about whether he was directly involved overseeing, allowing, or directly ordering what would amount to what appears to be, according to experts, a war crime committed in that Caribbean boat strike. Now, we have a top Democrat leading the probe who will be with us later tonight. And you've certainly seen some of the big news about this. Republicans also just know big picture that Trump is weakening. There's a new poll that finds him cratering to a second-term low. 47% was where he was at the beginning of the year. Now, crashing to 36 from Gallup. Trump also held one of these long cabinet meetings today, and he did touch on issues that have dogged Republicans and are certainly in play in the election I mentioned tonight. The high prices, the inflation, the affordability. Polling shows Americans have made up their minds about this, and by an overwhelming 2-to-1 margin, that's a margin you don't see on issues like guns or abortion or culture, but 2-to-1, people have come together, including a lot of Trump voters, to say, look, he is responsible for the rising prices. Here he was today.
And, you know, there's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. You just say it. Affordability. The word affordability is a con job by the Democrats. Affordability is a hoax that was started by Democrats.
Where do you even begin? We kept the actual views of the American public up on the screen so you could see that the public paying higher prices doesn't think these are hoax problems. And although not everyone follows every political development, people do generally remember that Donald Trump and the Republicans ran against Biden-Harris on inflation and high prices. It was the affordability stupid, or as our friend James Carville long ago said and is often quoted, it's the economy stupid, because people can't just be lied and spun out of what they're facing. And so amidst all these issues, including some we'll cover more tonight, I'm going to have more details on that reported potential war crime and more on some Epstein follow-up later in the hour. We begin with Donald Trump apparently trying to deny an iron rule of politics. People know how the economy is doing, and they will hold you responsible for it. No better way to introduce James Carville, a campaign strategist. He is now saying that when you take it all in, Donald Trump's presidency is all but over. James, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, gravity is a Democratic hoax. Just see what it is. I mean, of course, it's something that people are experiencing in real time. And when he says it's a hoax, how can you solve a problem that you say doesn't exist? All right, and that's essentially what he's saying. And I mean, politically, yeah. Let's look at Tennessee 7 tonight. You talked about it earlier. You know, there's an old saying that close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. I would add a third to that. Close would count in Tennessee 7. That would get a lot of people's attention in a district that Trump carried by 22 points. I might point out to our Civil War buffs that Franklin, Tennessee is located in the 7th Congressional District. And if you don't understand what happened in Franklin in 1864, it wasn't very good for the South, to say the least. So there's a lot of interesting going on right now, Ari. And Of course, affordability is real, and people experience it every day in every interaction they have with commerce.
As you say, Trump seems like he knows this is an issue, so it affects him however he thinks about it politically, personally, but he hasn't rounded the circle to look at it seriously, to really address it. I mentioned this briefly. I want to play Karl Rove, the longtime Republican insider, talking about you. Take a listen.
If the Republicans want to maximize their victories in 2026, they need to go back in the Wayback Machine to 1992 and remember the immortal words of that great strategist, James Carville. It's the economy, stupid, he said, and you got to have an agenda that is forward-looking. What are we going to have in the way of pro-growth policies that Americans will say, yeah, that'll make my family and my community and my financial prospects better?
Is he right? And does that mean we're just asking if you're right? But what do you think there?
Well, first of all, it's very flattering for him to say that about me. And of course, Karl knows that, and everybody in politics knows that you can't escape these issues that are every day. I mean, a human being has 20 different interactions with the economy every day, and you have to talk about it. It can't be denied, it can't be escaped. And he tells a bunch of sycophants in the cabinet room that it's not an issue, and people see that, and it's going to hurt him more. I mean, it's ridiculous to call this a Democratic hoax when you see what people are going through. By the way, it cost Harris the election. I think it's pretty clear that was a big factor in the Democrats' defeat in 2024. I think we learned something from losing. I don't think he learned anything from winning. I mean, sometimes you got to take a lesson away from winning, and I don't think he took a lesson away. I think we did.
It's funny when you put it like that. And Trump is famously the reality show star. People know that, the PR. But he may be losing a step. We can get into that. Politics is, you're on the field, so you're going to see how you're doing. On whether he's processing information, I mean, The Atlantic has this piece out. They call him the bubble-wrapped president. You mentioned the sycophantic cabinet. They're thinking along those lines. Everyone around him, everything he sees on TV and his phone is telling him he's right. Poll after poll suggests Americans believe Trump is now getting it wrong. Do you see that reality, the gravity you mentioned on the way into this convo, as what's finally separating Trump from this Republican House? We heard forever the narrative was, they're going to go along with anything. And on Epstein, on some economic messaging, and perhaps on this ongoing questions about what happened in the ocean, there seems to be more independence.
Well, first of all, Trump was, I think, 79. I'm 81, and you're not going to win against age. I can tell you. I'll fight as hard as I can. It's ultimately a losing battle. I don't want anybody to be sick. Okay, I want to be very clear about that. But I see all of the stories that everyone else sees. And if you look at this dust up in the Caribbean and you contrast that with President Obama, who Trump, by the way, Trump says he wants to court-martial for what? Shooting Obama, shooting bin Laden. Look at the professionalism of that and the way it was handled post-event compared to this thing in the Caribbean where Pete Hegseth doesn't know anything about it. Trump doesn't know anything about it. No one knows anything about everything. And you contrast that in 2011 when President Obama, famously in the Oval Office with everybody around, Vice President Biden, Hillary Clinton, and the Secretary of State, and they were all sitting there absorbing it in real time. I mean, I think there's a good contrast and a good lesson for American people to learn here when these kind of operations are carried out, how they're done. Now, I don't want to tell you a bunch of I don't know who these people were in this boat, but I knew exactly who bin Laden was, and I knew exactly what bin Laden did. And I didn't need any convincing that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. On those tensions, I want to play a little more, read a little more here from Axios reporting about the GOP speaker battles. More lies from the speaker is how Republicans put it. They call it a public feud. Monday, the weeds of it are Stefanik accuses Johnson of basically getting rolled by Dems because they stripped a provision which would require the FBI to tell Congress when it was opening these counter intel pros. If you want to get into those weeds, James, be my guest. I mean, you're already my guest. I guess it's a redundant statement. But I'm curious more about the politics of it, where they're basically turning Mike Johnson back into Kevin McCarthy. I mean, it's like if you're a Republican You've watched how many speakers go down in the MAGA era, and maybe people who are against their agenda say, okay, maybe that's better for the country. They don't want to see some of these things passed. But what does it tell you about how hard it is for them to stand by the speaker who, I'll remind everyone, they just recently picked?
Well, Stefanik is running for governor of New York. She's clearly feeling the heat on every point. And so the finger point, what are we not even at the end of the year yet? The election year hadn't even started, and the finger pointing is already starting. I mean, that's what that is. Let's blame Mike Johnson. Let's blame this. Let's blame John Thune. Let's blame somebody. But let's not blame the guy in charge. And that just does not work because people have a tendency to blame the guy in charge. I mean, Mike Johnson is a kind of pathetic, although he's a fellow Louisianian. He's one of the more pathetic characters of this century. And he was put in there because he was compliant and they couldn't find anybody else to do the job. And he's done as bad a job as you ever thought he would do. And he could do it. Now, Stefanik, and you're going to see more and more of them jump on him or blame somebody else who, like I said, we're not even in an election year and we're already starting the blame game.